what are you doing for Christmas? That, frankly, is the question, isn't it? That comes up as soon as Thanksgiving is over. What are you doing for Christmas? Well, I can tell you what Prince William isn't doing. He isn't going to have lunch with his father at Sandringham House. William has decided that, not for the first year, I hasten to add, he will not be joining his father for the roast turkey ceremony of Christmas Day. And I am told this has got a lot to do with the long simmering tensions between the monarch and his heir, which I have been reporting about all year, after they were made considerably worse by the king's shambolic handling of the Prince Andrew affair. And I'm told, intriguingly, that the presence of Beatrice and Eugenie might not have exactly encouraged, excuse me, will I move my microphone a little closer, might not have exactly encouraged William to go to Sandringham for Christmas lunch. Now, I have to say, looking at Sandringham House, it looks like rather a fun place to spend your Christmas day. I could imagine rather marvelous games of hide and seek and sardines and other Christmas rituals, all, of course, that we know about, so many of them described by Harry in his memoir Spare. Although, of course, that was largely set at Balmoral, but I believe the scene is similar English country house Christmas. So why on earth would he decide to skip that when he could be up there having, I would say, a jolly nice, well-cooked turkey, served very nicely with plenty of staff? Very hard to get staff on Christmas Day. Well, their offices did not respond. I did approach William's office and Charles's office, and in fact Beatrice and Eugenie's office, to ask for comment about this story, and I did not get any response. But this is what a source told me. William and the family will do their duty and go to church with big smiles pasted on, but they are not expected for Christmas lunch at the big house. It has been an extremely difficult year for William and Catherine. So what you're going to probably see happen on Christmas Day, you will see William and the family walking up from Sandringham House to St Mary's Chapel, where they have the Christmas service at 11 a.m. They will do the meet and greet with the crowds outside. They often do that before and after. They will then walk back in the direction of the house, but I'm told once they disappear from view, William and Catherine and their children will hop into cars and be whisked back to Anne Hall, where they will have a Christmas lunch with Catherine's parents. And that is the way that it has been. In fact, for the last 2 years, I know at a minimum it has been that. And this year there had been some hope given Charles's health condition. And as we've seen, he's not looking fantastic in the most recent pictures. I think there had been some hope that William might relent and bring the children for the big traditional royal Christmas at Sandringham. Indeed, Christmas at Sandringham is such a lavish affair that one former monarch used to weigh guests who were arriving for the Christmas vacation and weigh them on the way out. And if you hadn't put on at least 2 pounds, that was considered very bad form indeed. That was included in the film Spencer about Diana, although in fact it's a bit of a exaggeration because the custom no longer existed by the time that Diana was a guest at Sandringham. But yeah, the old jockey scales are still there in the courtyard, I'm told, but you are no longer put on them. That said, however, the reason that William is not going there is it's twofold. So partly there is a genuine desire to have a nice family Christmas. They've been through a lot this year and last year with the health struggles, all the trouble around Harry that has been very distressing for both of them, all of the troubles around Andrew and the general stress and anxiety of their positions. It has been a very difficult year. So it's entirely understandable that partly they wish to, like anybody else, eat a load of turkey, stretch out on the sofa, eat some chocolates, maybe watch the King's speech at 3 o'clock, and bolt up the windows and pull up the covers. Of course, that's very understandable and what any family wants to do at this time of year. But I do understand that the deep personal rift between father and son. William spoke openly to Eugene Levy, the reluctant traveller, about the trauma of his parents' separation, about how he was going to do things differently. That has been exacerbated by Charles's determination to continue to include Andrew's children, Beatrice and Eugenie, in formal royal events, and I'm told in the Christmas celebrations. Now, Beatrice and Eugenie have been invited to Sandringham. It's not certain whether or not they will attend. They may choose not to, just partly to avoid the limelight, partly because they may wish to be with their own families, much like William and Catherine. But they have been invited, and I am told that the insistence of Charles on keeping the princesses in the family is exacerbating tensions with William. So just a week after Andrew was stripped of his title, Charles gave Beatrice a coveted royal patronage for the Outward Bound Trust. I have to say the King's judgment was called into question by the fact that just 10 days previously, Beatrice had been hosting a tea party and sat the Hilton. Beatrice had been hosting a tea party in a luxury 5-star hotel in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, most famously used as a holding cell during Prince Mohammed bin Salman's crackdown on his relatives, where they were all, plenty of them were beaten and tortured in an anti-corruption drive, and hanging out with a lot of Andrew's old buddies at the private investment forum in Riyadh, known as Davos in the desert. Hanging out with a lot of Andrew's old contacts. Didn't go down particularly well with Prince William. So they have been invited for Christmas, but I understand that William's concerns go deeper than a Christmas photo call. And certainly if they choose to come, William has always made it clear that he respects his father's rank. And I think that's important to state, that ultimately William does respect the fact that his father is in charge. The royal family, as I've often explained, is based on military structures. So you do have to obey your superior. That is the way that things go in the royal family. You can snipe about it afterwards. You can bitch about it afterwards in the equivalent of the officer's mess, but you must obey your superior. So if you are ordered out on Christmas Day and Beatrice and Eugenie are there, William will go. He will not pull a face. He will not look cross. He will smile and he will do his duty. I think it'd be very helpful if Beatrice and Eugenie didn't go to Sandringham this year. I think if there was going to be a year to miss, this would be the year to miss. But William's concerns actually go a lot deeper than a photo call with or without Beatrice and Eugenie. That is not actually the definitive trigger of why he has these reservations. Both women continued to rent private properties as pied-à-terres in London from the King on terms that are completely unknown. Beatrice has a lovely apartment in St James's Court. Eugenie has Ivy Cottage in Kensington Palace. They both have other homes as well, but they have these to use whenever they go to London. We've always been told that they pay rent, but we were told for many years that Andrew paid rent. And it turned out that his rent was, checks notes, 1 peppercorn per annum if demanded. Doesn't sound like a particularly strenuous amount of rent to me. What terms are Beatrice and Eugenie on? The palace has been very quiet about this and has given us no hint. The thing is that William's whole operation is run by a contingent of very young, very digital savvy millennials who understand the threat that the King's frankly inexplicable endorsement of Beatrice and Eugenie represents to the monarchy. A friend of Eugenie's actually interesting. So there was this story out the other day saying that William had asked for an ethics check on Beatrice and Eugenie's finances that they had refused or declined. A friend of Eugenie told me that's complete nonsense, that there was no such request was ever made. And I have to say, I found that story a bit odd, because I think either it wouldn't have been a request, it would have been a demand, or it would not have been made. William's not in the habit of putting himself in the situation of politely asking for things that people can then decline. And a friend of William's actually said to me that it's not a specific fear about a specific detail. There's anxiety about the broader impact on the monarchy's reputation of anyone with the surname York being part of it. So the bigger picture here is the strained relationship between William and the King. I, at the Royalist, on my Substack, was the first outlet to properly report on this after I received some tips on it from people who know both sides over the summer. On August the 31st, I reported on the very strained relationship between Charles and his son and heir. I wrote, put simply, the big picture is that William thinks Charles's monarchy has not modernized as much as it should have. He still thinks it radiates pomposity and looks out of touch thanks to Charles's love of uniforms and ermine. And for a very good illustration of this, you can see the photograph of William earlier this year at a ceremony called the Order of the Bath, which is as ridiculous as it sounds. And it was a kind of fellowship of knights to do with bathing the king. I mean, it's unbelievable that the Order of the Bath still exists. And you can see in this photo, William scowling, forced to wear these ridiculous clothes. Charles, of course, looking proud as punch. Charles, the man who never met a military or ceremonial uniform that he didn't like. And Charles, so sorry, back to what this source was telling me earlier in the year, that he thought it was pompous, and that William does not like the idea that duty comes over the individual's health and well-being, whereas Charles thinks William is shirking the most basic element of the job, which is appearing in person all over the country, rain or shine, as the Queen used to say, need to be seen to be believed, and that his prioritization of family life over royal duty is inappropriate. Usually the monarch and the heir have different ideas about how they want to run the monarchy, right? And it doesn't matter because the monarch's in charge, and then when he dies, the heir takes over and they do it their way. And we saw with Elizabeth that there was a kind of transition period where Charles got to put his stamp sort of loosely on things, got to, make some changes. It was kind of pitched as a co-monarchy for certainly the last 7 years of the Queen's life. Charles is not giving that to William, despite the fact that, frankly, we probably are in the last 7 years of his reign. I would say that's quite optimistic, actually. If you look at recent pictures of Charles, lost a lot of weight, doesn't look fantastic. And because of that, that is what is creating this confrontation. Because we know that Charles, despite his relative youth, is sort of in the last few furlongs of his reign. We know that William wants to do things differently because he's said very openly to people like Eugene Levy, to people like Roy Nikar, that he wants to do things differently, that he wants to be royal with a small r, that he doesn't want all the ermine, the pomp, the ceremony, the ridiculousness. He wants to be much more like the bicycling monarchies of the Northern European countries. One really interesting story I was told earlier this year. Do you remember when William went to the Pope's funeral? Well, apparently, his initial reaction on being told that he had to go to that was that he couldn't go because Aston Villa were playing and he wanted to go to a football match. Well, he was put in his place there, but he did refuse. He didn't go to the VJ Day ceremony this summer, which was a really weird choice, I thought, because there was so much attention on how the VJ veterans were the forgotten army and all this. And there was the Prince of Wales, once again erasing their importance. A source told me at the time these were absolutely true, and that Charles's more casual approach can feel like a lack of respect for duty and tradition. The other thing, of course, is that William has argued from the beginning that Andrew should be cut off completely, and Charles went through this rigmarole of trying to rehabilitate him. And it's easy to forget that now, right? After Charles gave this statement saying it was never in doubt that he was going to kick Andrew out of the family, that this was always the plan, that he just needed the breathing space to figure out how to do it. That it was done incredibly quickly. But that was done at William's insistence, at William's behest. And this whole argument that it was going to take weeks and years, and it was going to take all this parliamentary time to get it done. Well, there was a fascinating story actually in Private Eye magazine last week saying that when they got rid of King Edward VIII. It took one morning of parliamentary time. So, and in fact, of course, in the end, Andrew didn't take any of parliamentary time. It was just a edict, letters patent issued in the London Gazette. So the conflict between Charles and William is very deep seated. It's existential, really. It's about the direction the monarchy should go. Andrew was a big flashpoint, and the Andrew issue has now been resolved. William has basically won that argument. But there is another huge flashpoint, which is Harry. Now, we've slightly, I suppose, forgotten about the Harry Charles reconciliation narrative because of everything that happened with Andrew. But I am told that the efforts are very much on Harry's side to reconcile with his father, to be in touch with his father, to put in phone calls to his father, and that these are still happening, and that regular contact is what has been described as to me is still happening between Harry and his father. Now, does that mean Harry's going to get an invite for Christmas? No, it does not. I think that if you start reading any headlines about that, they're nonsense. Invites have gone out a long time ago. People aren't going to start realizing their plans at this stage. Of course, never say never in the royal family, but to be honest, I don't think Harry and Meghan are going to show up at Sandringham on Christmas Day. Although that would be quite a story, wouldn't it? But the point is that the conflict about how to deal with Harry has become another has now that the Andrew thing has been dealt with, that was always actually the bigger conflict and the bigger issue to resolve, because on Andrew, people ultimately agreed that he couldn't really be part of the royal family. It was just a question of degree, and ultimately William won that argument where he said, well, the degree is total. But with Harry, there is disagreement because William does not believe he can be part of the royal family. Charles does believe that he still needs to be part of the family, to use the Queen's formulation, much loved members of the family. And Charles is trying to get that result. That's what he's trying to engineer. That is the result that he wants. He wants, as Harry said in his book, please, that Charles said to both of them, please, boys, don't make my final years a misery. Well, I think what was always misunderstood was that this was directed as much at William as it was at Harry. And William has really upset the king by refusing to kiss and make up, to shake hands, however you want to put it, with Harry. And we have seen, it's very unusual to see a massive divergence, to publicly see a really big divergence on a crucial policy issue between the monarch and his heir. But we have absolutely seen that this year, because we have seen Harry go into Clarence's house, be welcomed by Charles, be given tea and chocolate cake and the exchange of gifts. And where was William when that was happening? At the other end of the country, literally at the other end of the country, in Wales somewhere. So there is tension, significant tension between William and his father. Andrew made it worse, but ultimately it's about Harry. It's about the direction of the monarchy. It's about the tone of the monarchy. It's about the function of the monarchy. It's about the philosophy of the monarchy. It's about divine right. It's about all these really huge issues. And what I find so interesting is how the UK media, who frankly all know this stuff, completely cover it up. And there was an amazing example of that earlier this year. Some national newspapers began picking up on my story about the conflict between the two brothers, especially after Tina Brown did something on it. And Buckingham Palace very swiftly thereafter put out a story saying that William was going to Scotland for a brainstorming session with his father, and that they were going to sort of huddle and plan the future of the monarchy. It was like the Way Ahead Group Mark II, for those of you who remember the Way Ahead Group. And the UK media just so cravenly swallowed it. And I swear to goodness, within 3 or 4 phone calls, I found out that they weren't even staying at the same house. They were staying 8 miles apart. William was staying at Balmoral and Charles was staying at Birkhall. And that William actually wasn't there for a conference with his father. He was there to shoot grouse with his mates on the moors at Balmoral. And that's what was going on. It was, as a certain other member of the family might have put it, a straightforward shooting weekend. Ultimately, the Times of London, which I must say is less craven than most of the other media, probably thanks to Rupert Murdoch's ownership, said they ultimately, after I'd written my story, it said, last month, William travelled to Scotland without his wife to visit the king and catch up with friends staying at Balmoral while Charles was at Birkhall. The palace has got a bit of a problem with me, and they have been aggressively trying to discredit a lot of my reporting, which is pretty detailed, pretty accurate, about the significant differences of opinion and the tensions between William and his father after a spat I had with the King's communications secretary when I described King Charles's cancer as incurable. The King's press secretary objected to this on grounds of taste, not accuracy, I hasten to add. Taste kicked me out of the palace's international rota and used me as an example to threaten other journalists not to report on demise planning for the King's death. That's fine. I respect the right of the palace to run their media operation however they want. It's their job to try and control the press coverage. It's my job to not be controlled by the press coverage. As William Randolph Hearst said, journalism is something that somebody somewhere doesn't want you to know, and everything else is advertising. And the PR's job is to try and advertise their principle, and the journalist's job should be to stand up and try and find out the stuff they don't want us to know. And that's what I've always tried to do. So, man does job. Hey, whatever, kick me out, don't kick me out. I don't care. I'm a journalist. It's not very hard to get hold of the briefings shared in a WhatsApp group, for goodness sake. But beyond that, beyond my personal, argument with various individuals, it's an attempt to, by trying to sort of silence people like me, it's an attempt to conceal that there is a conflict at the heart of the British monarchy now that is extremely visible, that William wants to strip back the pomp, strip back the uniforms, family life, love is all we need. Charles wants constant visibility. He wants the old form of monarchy that his, in fact, all the words that we heard about how he was going to be modernizing and how he was going to do this, ultimately he's perhaps even more old-fashioned than his mother. So it leaves the royal family, as they come up to this Christmas, facing into a decision that needs to be made. And I think the decision that needs to be made is, at what point are people in the palace, in Charles's office, going to accept that in practice, de facto, Charles's reign is pretty much over, and we need to start transitioning to William's reign and Catherine's reign. Now, I think that William and Catherine understand, as reluctant as they are, I'm sure they would have much preferred to have more 20 years of quiet family life and not having to do a huge amount. I think they understand that the transition has started and needs to step up a gear next year. So that, for me, is going to be the story to watch. And that actually, by not attending the formal Christmas lunch at Sandringham, it's actually an important statement about them stepping into the shoes, stepping into the role, getting ready for what is going to come next. And I don't think there's any possibility of a formal regency. I certainly don't think there's any possibility of an abdication. Charles does need to start to understand that the consideration and the cooperation that was extended to him by his predecessor now needs to be extended by him to his successor. So that's more or less all I have to say. Thank you very much all for being here. I hope you had enjoyable Thanksgiving Day yesterday. I hope to see you all here next week. It's going to be a very interesting time of year, and the run up to Christmas is such a big occasion for the royal family. I've got great story that I did a few years ago about how Queen Victoria essentially invented the sort of Christmas that we understand now, what Christmas to be, so many of the rituals and traditions. So I'm going to try and dig that out and do a bit of a special on it. And in the meantime, please please subscribe, please share. And the more we can get my community here up and get the follower count up, the longer I can keep doing this. So thank you so much, everybody. I really am. I know it's Thanksgiving. I know sounds cheesy, but I am so incredibly grateful and blown away. It's been the most amazing experience starting to do this. I can't believe I only started this YouTube channel 4 or 5 weeks ago. And thanks so much to Ben, who's such a brilliant producer and is here working away today, and to Paula and to Tim and to all my other collaborators who've come on, and looking forward to really exciting December and Christmas. And then in January, we've got Prince Harry's trial in the High Court with the Daily Mail, which is going to be sensational if it goes ahead. And I am told, actually, by sources that it is going ahead, that Harry is not backing down, despite the Gavin Burrows, one of the key witnesses, pulling out. I'm told that it is going ahead and it's going to be blockbuster. So lots to look forward to. Thank you. Goodbye.